Welcome to the USL in 2022. I'm Sebastian Salazar. I work at ESPN. We are the official broadcast partner of USL, and it's great to be joined on stage today by Jake Edwards. He's the president of USL, been with the organization since 2013. It's president since 2015, is that right?
That's correct, yes.
That's right, he's been putting in the work. And Amanda Vandervort, who is heading up the new USL Super League as its president, and you joined back in the fall, right?
Yeah, October.
Awesome. So, exciting times for both you guys as we get started. Jake, I'll start with you, though. Give us kind of the big picture. Where are we at as we head into 2022?
Thanks everybody for joining us this morning. I did have a matching jacket to Amanda's suit. Unfortunately, I forgot to bring that with me. USL's in a really good spot right now, and it's positioned well, I think, for growth moving forward. As we sit here today, we have 38 professional teams. They are more relevant and more engaged in their communities than ever before. We've worked hard over the last few years to put a foundation in place that starts with the ownership at our clubs. We have a stronger, more ambitious group of owners than we've ever had before. We have built a tremendous amount of infrastructure. We've got 33 football-specific stadiums that we've built or retrofitted for our clubs over the last few years. And as we sit here today, we have $3 billion invested in stadium infrastructure projects. So we are, I think, probably the largest developer of stadiums in the world for sports leagues. And we've put structures in place to protect the integrity and the professionalism of the league, such as our CBA that we just ratified with our players' union for the next 5 years. So that infrastructure gives us an ability to scale up. So for those who aren't familiar with the USL, we run 7 leagues. We run leagues from the youth level to the pre-professional and then the professional. We have over 800 teams in that ecosystem, and we're in over 200 communities in the US in those 7 leagues. And the exciting next step for us is to build a vertical on the women's side from the youth to the pre-professional to the professional, with the Super League sitting at the apex of that.
You mentioned the 38 teams. It was, I think, 13 when you joined the league, so it's quite an impressive bit of growth. Before you joined USL, you were with FIFA Pro and MLS, so I'm sure you kind of watched the USL from afar. You see what they were doing. Why so interested in joining the USL to take over the Super League?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. It's so good to be here. And I love looking around and seeing so many friends. You know, you mentioned I was at MLS and FIFA Pro before that, and it's so cool to see such a great groundswell of support for everything that we're doing at the USL across the entire soccer ecosystem. So I just look around and I see so many friendly faces, and I love it because I think that's what we need as we're building women's soccer, you know, in this country across this ecosystem that, you know, we have that support. So for me, coming to the USL, I came in October, and the infrastructure that Jake's talking about was so key to me making the decision to come into a professional setup that has 100 people working at our league office already. We have stadium infrastructures. We have owners with experience and club leadership across the board with experience running professional soccer clubs that can now transcend into the women's side of the game and ensure that we're building not only a really exciting league and entire pathway for the women, but for today, but also a long-term sustainable future.
One of the things I didn't mention about the 2 panelists here is they're 2 of the few sports executives that actually played. Jake, you played against Manchester United in an FA Cup match, right? And Amanda, you played collegiately as well. So as somebody who played the game, you're growing up, and then the call comes, hey, you get to not just be part of a women's league, but like launch it, help launch it. That must be a dream, right?
Oh, it's absolutely a dream, yeah. And, you know, I think so I worked when I was working in the game before. I've played, I coached here. I was the president of the Coaches Association, the United Soccer Coaches. Our CEO is here today. I was at FIFA Pro, so I was living in Europe. I was the chief women's football officer at the Global Players Union. So I have kind of that player's perspective in the way I think about the game and how I think about the business of soccer, that we need to be considerate of the needs and the conditions that we provide for our players to be able to compete at the elite level throughout their playing careers.
What was the impetus, Jake? What made USL sit down and say, okay, we need to do this, and we need to do it at a big level? Because kind of what you're going down with the road, not just the W League, but also the Super League, that's a lot of women's soccer that you guys are investing in.
I think, yeah, so, I mean, we've been working on this for a few years to get to this point, and the genesis of it really started with the football clubs. We've been working for many years to make sure our clubs are becoming, you know, hyper-relevant and real community-based organizations and inclusive of the entire community. And we were not servicing a large portion of that community, and they recognized that. So the clubs wanted to bring girls and women's football, youth and professional or pre-professional into their organization and appeal to the wider portion of the community. So as we think about that over the last few years, from a league point of view, you see such an opportunity gap. You know, you think about there are, well, certainly in this country, it's probably the largest developer of talent in the women's game in the world. Yet there are 7 times as many men's professional teams as women's professional teams. There are nearly 40,000 women playing football at university, and then there's only about 250 professional playing jobs. You know, so I think we feel with the ecosystem we have, we can, and it's our responsibility, I think, to close that opportunity gap, not just to play professionally, but to coach, to referee, to work in the front office, to own a team. And so that's where it begins. And then I think it's also important to recognize it's good business. Why wouldn't you? You should be involved in the women's game. There is more interest from a sponsorship point of view than at any time in the past. The media conversations that we have are often led by women's football. And although it's a sort of a nascent international transfer market, it's exponentially growing faster than the men's side. And you know better than anybody from your work at FIFPro, but there's opportunity there on the business side too.
I wonder, how have you in your different roles, Amanda, kind of seen the interest, maybe just in the last half decade, grow in the women's game?
Yeah, it's unbelievable. I mean, I think we're in this really interesting period where, in particular, the business community is, is really looking for positioning alongside women athletes, alongside women brands, women-led brands, women-owned brands, and really driving the value of those women's properties. So yeah, we're seeing a lot of commercial interest, and I think that's important to note, like Jake talked about in the media conversations too. I mean, what we do know about fans of women's soccer is how engaged they are in content, on social media. I began my career on...
They'll be tweeting about that.
Yeah, somebody will, because I was just about to say I began my career in Twitter. So so I've lived the social experience as women's soccer has grown, as did my career in women's soccer. And to be honest, I've never had a job other than being a coach when I was the head coach at NYU back in the early 2000s. But I've never had a job in soccer that anyone had before me. And I think that's a testament to this consistent growth of women's football, and football, soccer more broadly in this country, but women specifically.
So we're talking a lot about business now. I'm more interested in the soccer side of things, and I think to the point you mentioned, Jake, these leagues are now going to create a depth for the talent pool for the U.S. women's national team, which we know already is bronze medalist at the Olympics, but #1 ranked in the world. To that end, it's not just the Super League, it's the W League that's coming in this year. Explain to me kind of the differences there between the two leagues and how they might kind of combine and come together to create maybe the beginnings of a pyramid there?
So the W League is our pre-professional property. So that means the players in the W League retain their amateur status, which allows them to also compete in the NCAA system in college. So the W League runs in the summer. We kick off in May this summer, and we'll run until July. That's our W League property. And we are providing elite level soccer for those athletes. We announced yesterday that our calendar for the Super League, which is our top-tier professional property, will run from August to June. So we will actually be on an international calendar with the professional league. Those players will be top-level professional, paid on contract and paid at the same standard that we have with the men's championship, Division II professional level, top professional level.
Tell me a little bit about that decision, because people will immediately see the headline, oh my gosh, we're going to have an international calendar in the United States. How are you going to do it with the weather? So how are you going to do it?
Yeah, well, we'll play in the fall and the spring through the summer. We'll have a winter break. We actually heard the players talk a lot about how important this was, so we created this schedule with players in mind, with fans in mind, and with clubs in mind. So speaking of, the winter very specifically, we'll break when the months are cold, and we're in conversations with all of our ownership groups about what the best dates are for those, points in the year. But we believe that this calendar gives our players a great opportunity to manage their club and country balance. It gives fans in all the communities the highest level elite soccer, professional soccer in their communities more often, because they'll have their senior national team or top players consistently throughout the year. And then for clubs, it opens up an entirely new commercial opportunity that they didn't have on the existing, on a more traditional calendar through the summer.
Do you think, Jake, somewhere down the road we might see this in USL on the men's side?
Well, I've talked openly about our desire to take the USL and further align, more deeply align with the global structure and the norms of the global structure of football. Amanda and her team at the Super League have done a tremendous amount of research in terms of the challenges in the women's game in the current calendar between club and international level football, and the opportunity of doing it differently and being a leader in that space. The advantage there is that when you're launching a league from scratch, you can think about those things in a different way, and you can make those changes from the get-go, or implement that structure from the get-go. The championship now about a decade old. It's a little bit more complicated to sort of make these changes. It takes a bit more work, and that work is going on in the background with the calendar, with promotion relegation, with other initiatives that we're working on. We will, be sitting down in more detail with our owners and our clubs on the men's side to see if the calendar optimization of the calendar, the current calendar, makes sense. We've said in terms of men's and women's football, we want to go about this and put these two leagues on equal footing. But that doesn't necessarily mean that everything you do has to be the same. And Super League have made a decision in the best interests of the Super League and women's football, and the Championship and League One will arrive at a decision which is in the best interests of the men's side, and it may or may not be the same, but we're doing that work at the moment.
I'm interesting when I hear Jake say equal footing there. What does that mean for you as the president of the women's side?
Yeah, it means, to get really specific on that, the men completed their CBA in the fall, and we've committed as the USL and our ownership groups to the same standards and compensation that are in the men's CBA will be the same in the women's. Now, I will also add, we're doing a lot of work on additional pieces that may not have been considered in the men's CBA negotiations, so related to pregnancy and maternity. What are those standards that we're going to put in place for our players and across the league that maybe weren't considered as well? So I think equal pay and equitable conditions is probably the right way to approach that. And for me personally, I couldn't be more proud to be part of this leadership group and part of this league, because we genuinely think and act and talk about equality all the time in the office. And like Jake is a leader, and like I love working with these guys.
I think it's one thing that differentiates the league and puts us in a good position, as we've got a little over almost 100 executives, many of whom have played the game collegiately or professionally on the women and men's side. And as we think about all the elements of running these different leagues, it's all run under the same roof with a lot of the same people. So we're always thinking about these things in the same way, and that is unique. I think we're the only organization that can do that, and that helps in terms of how we put these two leagues on equal footing.
I hear you mention you have a lot of people who played the game. I kind of mentioned both your resumes have that. How important do you think that is for like running a soccer business in this country?
It's a good question. I don't want to say it's essential because there are some very successful sports leagues in the world that aren't run by people that have played that particular sport professionally. It's not essential. I think from our point of view, it gives us the ability to think about the league as a football-first league, as a fan-first league. And I think if you try to make decisions through that lens, because you've played the game, you've got a passion and love for the game, you try to make decisions through that lens, is helpful. It helped us certainly go through that CBA process because you can empathize with players. You've been in their shoes, you understand the journey they're undertaking, the challenges they have. So I think going through the CBA, it served as well. There are, as I say, a number of people that have played the game professionally. I've just hired a new sporting director from the Premier League, an old teammate of mine, and he's fundamentally helping the clubs think about, how to structure the technical side of their clubs so we can start thinking about participating more in the global game. So rather than a league that's purely business-led, I think having people there that appreciate and understand the game, for us, I think it makes a big difference.
Amanda, you agree?
I think players' voices always need to be at the table. I think coaches' voices need to be at the table. I think we need women at the table just as much as we need men and business executives with other points of view and bring sponsorship and business to the table as well. So we make the best, ultimately we have to make the decision, but to have all those voices at the table to me is critical.
So I like how Jake said that his job is harder because he has to convince people to change their ways. You don't have to do that. What are some of the benefits of kind of launching something from scratch?
Yeah. Well, we put the research in on the calendar side, right? So I think being able to do that work in an open space and have those conversations in an authentic way and say, you know what, just because this is the way it's always been done, doesn't mean it's the way it has to be done in the future. We can also look at all of the great, I talked about it earlier, about all the great infrastructure that we have in place at the USL, but it may not necessarily be right for the women in all cases. So what is it that we need to either add on, change, or do a little bit differently for the Super League that doesn't necessarily fit into the mold that exists, but complements it and makes it stronger?
We've maybe in the past, and I think you just touched on it with the CBA, talked about going through that process. Why is it so important for having that kind of first CBA for the league and its growth?
I think it speaks to the maturity of the league and where we are now that we are engaged and we have a 5-year CBA. I think it's critical for the players because it gives them certainty of experience, and often CBAs are more relevant for a smaller population of the player base. And so it's setting the floor and minimum standards. And that was important to us, that if a player comes to the USL, they can have the same experience coast to coast, whatever their club that they're at. They're going to have minimum level of experience. And as I said, we've got a lot of clubs, so sort of policing that from Tampa can be a challenge. So having these standards in place certainly helps that. So it supports the players on their journey. We want them to have a good experience. For our clubs, as they're planning their business, it gives them certainty now, sort of 5 years down the road. They understand the labor cost, they understand what's going to be, how it's going to incrementally grow each year. And I think it makes it more attractive, the USL is, for players coming from overseas, because we know leagues around the world are run at different levels and players have different good or bad experiences. At least players coming in now, they're going to know what they're going to get, and there's a level of sophistication, professionalism, minimum standards, and it gives them and their families some certainty of the experience that they're going to have. So it was critically important to us.
And that's interesting, Amanda, right? Because when you guys go through that process, it's not going to be a simple cut and paste, right? You're going to have to come up with a whole new system and really address whole new needs for the women's game.
Yeah, exactly. But we talk a lot about our point of differentiation here is that we do have this men's baseline that's been worked on, built with the players themselves. And so being able to apply that on the women's side is something that I don't think a league has had the fortune of building from that base to start with in the past. So, we do think that's a great a great thing that sets the standards for the men, but also, for the women today. And then as our women's platform grows, we'll evolve that based on what the players, describe their needs as.
So the title of this panel was USL in 2022. Let's think a little bit further ahead. Let's think to 2026 when, of course, the World Cup will be here, Canada and Mexico as well. Jake, I'll start with you. Where do you see USL 4 years from now?
Yeah, the World Cup for the last few years has been a good North Star, I think, for us and some of the projects we've been working on. 4 years is close and it's going to come pretty quickly. And so I think it's in part looking at the World Cup. Who do we want to be when we get there? And it's in part the legacy in the couple of years after that. We're not a finished article now. We won't be a finished article in 4 years. There's continued growth. I think what's important for us, we're in this rapid expansion phase, especially in League One. We would like to conclude the expansion, certainly the championship, by the time the World Cup comes around. So the expansion boom we're seeing now, we will be tailoring that off. The continued investment in infrastructure and stadiums and training complexes will continue. We've got 25 stadiums to build between now and the World Cup, so significant infrastructure. We are in a media renewal period right now, so for 23 onwards and likely through the World Cup, we'll be in the next media deal, so you'll see a significant increase in exposure of the USL leagues domestically and internationally by then. And we're really starting to build out this a strong commercial business now, so a lot of emphasis will continue. But I think the most exciting thing is that as I look at the composition of the league at the moment, we have a significant number of senior internationals already playing in the USL that are representing their countries. Gold Cup, African Cup of Nations, World Cup qualifying. So when the expanded World Cup hits these shores, you're going to have USL players playing in that World Cup. So our communities and our fans are going to be able to cheer on their local player who's going to be representing their particular country. So that's very exciting.
Real quick on expansion, you're going to be over 50 teams soon. What's the competition like with the cities that are kind of vying for these spots? And are you at a point now that you never thought you might be where you have to almost turn people away?
We're in a different position. When I started in 2013, you were pounding the pavement. You're out there knocking on doors and trying to sell, try and sell soccer in these communities. And it's just different now. So it was a lot of outbound. Now it's a lot of inbound through the network we have. But what's driving a lot of the expansion is the stadium development. There is a massive need for these facilities in communities across the country. So it often starts there. And so we often have dialogue, not just with potential investors, but with the cities themselves who are looking to bring a USL team to their community, or a USL Super League team, or a men's professional team to their community. So it often starts with that. We've got about 50 active conversations going on, and we are close to finalizing upwards of 15 new deals with teams for League One over the next 2 to 3 seasons. So there's a real boom in expansion that's happening at the moment.
And if we think about the Super League, Amanda, it'll be in what, year 4 at that time? 23, 24, 25? Yes, 26, my math still holds up. Where do you see the league in 2026?
Yeah, thriving, thriving. You look at some of the things we've talked about. I think in 2023 we're going to have, we'll launch right on the back of the Women's World Cup, right, and ride that momentum into the beginning of our season. So we think a lot about the impact that these international tournaments that Jake alluded to have on our game and will have on the Super League. So, you look at 23 and you look at the impact 26, and then hopefully, U.S. Soccer is working on the bid to bring the Women's World Cup back to the United States. So we hope to see that in the future too. So we're in a strong position to launch, and we're excited about the future of the Super League. But I think actually a lot about the USL, and another thing, when I think about where we are in the world and taking this a little bit out of soccer, I'm gonna take a left turn here, because I think a lot about the macroeconomics of the world and what we're looking at right now. And you're looking at this big city exodus, right? People coming to towns like the cities that we have top professional soccer in across this country. There's a huge influx of people coming into the cities that the USL exists in. I think you're looking at we talk a lot about the Great Resignation, but I think that's really focused on a labor movement and people really believing in social justice and equal pay, and that's something foundational to what we're building with the Super League. And this need for outdoor entertainment and people coming together. We talk a lot about the movement going from I to we. And I think the platform that the USL provides, both on our men's and our women's side, really answers the needs of society at this really interesting time. So all of us just come back together after COVID for the first time and trying to figure out how to have awkward conversations over a coffee or a beer. Like, we're all in this together and kind of experiencing this new world. And I couldn't think of a better league or series of leagues better positioned for this time right now, so that in that when I'm answering that question 6-7 years from now about where is the Super League, there's no doubt in my mind that we're absolutely going to be thriving.
Yeah, some absolutely huge markets in this country that weren't being served, you know, not just soccer, women's soccer, any of it. And USL is in a ton of those now. So congratulations to both of you. Really looking forward to this year and for the next 4 years as well.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Abby.
you. Thanks everyone for coming.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks, everyone.